About 4 years ago, when I was 8 months pregnant, something weird happened. My belly was big and noticeable because I was almost ready to have my baby. I went to the local mall to do some Christmas shopping. It was around 9 o'clock at night when I finished. After I got my shopping done, I walked out of the mall to head to my truck. At this mall, there's a road that goes around the building, and the parking lot is on the other side of the road, so to get to the parking lot you have to cross the road. As I was leaving the store, I saw a man standing in the middle of the road. He looked right at me and made eye contact. I quickly looked away and kept walking. At the same time, 2 other men walked past him to go into the mall. He didn't look at them or say anything to them. He just kept his eyes on me. I noticed he started walking toward me. "Excuse me, can you help me?" Being from the South, I was raised to be polite, so I couldn't ignore him. I asked, "What do you need?" He looked around and said, "Can you help me start my car? I think my battery is very low now." I may be polite, but I'm not foolish. If his car was really having trouble, why would he ask a pregnant woman for help instead of the 2 men who just walked past him? That didn't make sense to me. So at this point, I knew it was time to leave. I said, "Sorry, I can't help," and kept walking, but this time a little faster. I could still see him from the corner of my eye, and he was following me. I had my keys out and was ready to get in my truck as soon as I reached it, but he was still following me. "You're really not going to help me? I just need a jump," I replied. "Nope, sorry." I finally got to my truck, unlocked it, and got inside. By now, he was almost running toward me. I locked the doors quickly and tried to put the key in the ignition, but my hands were shaking so much that I couldn't get it to fit. He reached my truck and started banging on the window. Then he grabbed the door handle and tried to open my door, screaming, "Just open the door." That's when I lost my cool and made a quick decision. I've taken self-defense classes before and knew I needed to act to protect myself and my baby. When he tried to open my door, my only thought was to keep us safe. I rolled down the window and said, "I'm not going to tell you again. Stop following me." It felt like time stopped in that instant. I didn't know what he would do next, but I was ready to use the self-defense skills I had learned if he came any closer. But fortunately he didn't. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked away. Even though the danger was gone, I couldn't leave right away. I sat there frozen and shaken. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I had come to being in serious danger. I was terrified, not just about what could have happened, but also about how quickly I had to act to protect myself and my baby. It's not a situation I ever want to face again, but I'm glad I trusted my instincts. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I know I was still in kindergarten. Every time my dad picked me up, we often stopped at a park on our way home. My dad is an amazing person, and when I was little he would create treasure maps just for me. He didn't stop there. He actually went to the park beforehand and hid real treasures like small toys or shiny coins, and I'll always remember how much effort he put into making those moments so special. We were at the park like we usually were, and while we were walking, I saw a sewer hole with steam coming out of it, almost like it was a furnace. We were walking toward it, and I remember my dad saying, "Look, maybe this is where Santa makes gifts for the good kids." I laughed a little because by then I already knew Santa wasn't real. As we walked past the sewer, I got curious and peeked through the small holes in the cover. The steam was thick, but I could still make out something unusual through the mist. I saw a man wearing a strange triangle-shaped hat. It wasn't something you'd see every day, and it gave me a weird feeling. Everything happened so quickly, I only had a moment to look. The man was sitting at a table, and it seemed like he was writing something, though I couldn't see exactly what. When I saw him, I remember freezing for a moment. So many thoughts were running through my little head. I wondered if he was a real elf and maybe my dad was telling the truth, or if my dad had hired someone to pretend, just like he hid the treasures for me too. find either way. I didn't say anything to my dad, and he didn't mention it either. When we got home, I was so excited that I told my grandma I had seen a Christmas elf in the park, but I could tell she didn't believe me. My dad was laughing too, but he didn't say anything to confirm or deny it. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had seen. I kept picturing the strange man in the triangle-shaped hat and wondering if it could really have been an elf. Eventually, I convinced myself that my dad had probably planned it all. Maybe he had asked someone to dress up as an elf and sit in the sewer just like he hid treasures for me in the park. But a few years later, when I finally asked my dad about it, he said he never did anything like that and asked me more about what I saw. I told him everything, and he said it was probably just my wild imagination since I was so little at the time. But I know what I saw, and I still remember it clearly. Even now, I even went back to the same park to check the area, but a lot of has changed. The place looks completely different now. There's no walking path and no sewer hole, just plain grass. What's even stranger is that as the years went by, every time I remembered that man, I started noticing similarities between him and myself. I only saw him briefly, and from behind it had the same color and texture as mine, something I realized when I saw photos of myself years later. After I'd grown up, it felt weird, almost like I was looking at an older version of myself, but I can't say for sure. Maybe it's just my imagination running wild over the years, trying to make sense of what I saw. Still, it's something that sticks with me even now. I'm a single mother of my 8-year-old boy Mark. When this happened, he was 5 and I was 27. I have my own house that was passed down to me from my grandparents. It's in the quiet side of town with a lot of older people, and I still live here with Mark. Today it was Christmas time and I was out with Mark shopping. I was doing my Christmas shopping for my family, Mark, and I went to the mall, including a few clothing stores and a hardware store where I bought a gift for my dad. After all the shopping was done, I took Mark to McDonald's to get him some burgers and ice cream. Afterwards, we left the mall through the south exit, and here we bumped into a mall Santa standing outside. He waved at us and said the usual Santa stuff. He then knelt down to get to Mark's level and asked him what he wanted for Christmas. Mark led my hand closer to the Santa, and I allowed it because he seemed like a normal, nice mall Santa. Mark said he wanted a Nintendo Switch, which ironically was what I was planning on buying him for Christmas. The Santa laughed and said, "If you're good, maybe you'll get it," while looking up at me and winking. I smiled, and then he stood up and started complimenting me, saying to Mark, "Your mother's a looker, Mark, you know that?" And Mark laughed even though he didn't know what that meant. I still smiled. Then we had a couple minutes worth of seemingly friendly adult conversation about the holiday mayhem and such. The guy said he worked for them all. I regrettably mentioned the stress of being a single mom during Christmas is unfathomable, and then I made a joke about needing Santa's help. Then the Santa made what I thought was an innocent joke, saying, "Mark, have you ever heard the song I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus?" And Mark shook his head yes. Then he leaned in towards me with his cheek, implying he wanted me to kiss his cheek. I was going to give him an innocent little peck on the fake beard, but as I leaned in, he turned his head and tried doing that old trick where he kisses you on the lips. Instead, I moved my face away in time. The way he did it was so creepy and aggressive too. He looked at me and started doing the Santa kind of left, but there was nothing jolly about it. I said, "Come on, Mark," and we started walking away. He yelled "Merry Christmas," and that was the last thing I heard him say. As we drove away past the back exit of the mall, I noticed he wasn't there in front of the entrance anymore. I wish I took that into consideration. As to what may have happened next, we got home and After bringing everything inside, I locked the door, and Mark and I started to watch a Christmas movie. Our wholesome time together was then interrupted. My doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was late for any kind of door-to-door people. I told Mark to keep watching. As I went to go answer the door, I said, "Who is it?" through the door, and a man's voice on the other side said, "It's Santa." My heart dropped. I said, "If you're the mall Santa, please go away, or I'm calling the cops." He replied, "You dropped something out of your bag, miss. I'm just looking to return it." I replied, "What did I drop?" He replied, "I don't know, miss. I'm not looking to be nosy, but if you open the door, I can hand it to you." I repeated myself that I wanted him to leave now. I then decided to call the mall management office of the mall to report this, but the man on the phone said they don't officially hire any mall Santas at this mall, and that whoever is dressing as Santa is doing it on their own accord. With that bit of information, I felt incredibly unsafe. I went back to be with Mark, but my mind was elsewhere now. I felt this sickly, worried feeling in my gut. I made an excuse to get up again. After a few minutes, I went to the kitchen, out of earshot of the TV. I raised the blinds to the kitchen window. I couldn't see anything out there, being that the kitchen light was on and it was pitch black outside, but I heard a man yelling, "Ho, ho, ho." He was probably out there, watching me at that very moment, looking out the window. I had no choice but to call the police and report that I was followed by a man dressed as Santa. I told Mark to keep watching the movie, and I spoke to the police outside. They took a report and were on their way. The police having come made me feel just a little better. A few nights later, though, my doorbell rang again around the same time, if not a little later. Mark was already asleep tonight. I was in the living room watching a show. I turned off the TV and went upstairs to my room, which is connected to Mark's room. The doorbell didn't ring again, but I never went back downstairs that night. It wasn't until the next day, when I was leaving the house, that I found the note taped to my front door. It was typed out and printed. This is a picture of the note, and it said, "I'll just be blunt. I'm sure you can guess who this is. I didn't mean to scare you the other night. I just had a long shift, and when a pretty lady talks to you after pretending to be Santa for 6 hours, hormones kind of go crazy. You and your son are the cutest things ever, and I'd love to one day be a part of your family. You can't pretend you didn't feel the connection when we spoke the other night. I already know where you live now. I just need your number. Feel free to shoot me a text whenever, and maybe we can plan something one day. Sorry, I know this may seem creepy or a bit much, but I'm the kind of guy where if I see something I like, I go after it anyway. Happy holidays. If we don't speak soon, here's my number. Best, Ted." I wanted to crumple this up, but I took a picture of it, called the police again, and gave this to them. Since it had his number on it, the police could work with that. They said I'd be hearing from someone when action was taken, and that following Monday, I got a call from, I assume, a detective, telling me that the man would not be contacting me anymore, and if he did, to let him know. I never heard from that creep again. I assumed the police threatened to arrest him if there was any further contact.